Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy to be part of this India EV Expo and Conference organized by Franchise India, being held in Chennai. It was wonderful to hear Mr. Vishnu to talk about how supportive is the Tamil Nadu government for the industry. And I'm sure it is going to do a great deal of goodness to the evolution of EVs also in the state of Tamil Nadu. I'll share my views on the pivotal role EVs have started to play in the India's energy transition. Let me start with the global perspective on emerging EV ecosystem. The whole world is grappling with the global warming and climate change. The last year, 2023, was the hottest year on the planet Earth. And besides, the environmental degradation which the temperature rise causes, it's a matter of record that every single degree rise in the temperature impacts the GDP of the world by 10 to 12%. So that's the cause of, adverse impact of the global warming. As per the statistical review of the World Energy Report, in the year 2022-23, the total energy consumption has grown to 12,000 million metric tons of oil equivalent in the world, which is causing huge amount of CO2 emissions to the extent of 40 gigatons every year. And transportation is also one of the major reasons for the CO2 emissions. It contributes to approximately 15% of the total emissions in the whole world. I think, we have also how do we tackle this CO2 emissions and the urban pollution? This is also on the top of the agenda of the various governments across the globe, and all the developed economies are incentivizing so that the energy transition towards the decarbonization can happen. And I can talk about some of the countries like United States, which has come out with the entire Inflation Reduction Act of US, wherein they have earmarked approximately $780 billion of the capex to be spent on transition to the clean energy and the climate change. In UK, I was traveling actually last month, and I understood that the government of UK has mandated that from 2026 onwards, 20% of the vehicles produced by any of the ICE manufacturer also, ICE OEM also, have to be in the EV space to promote and to push the adoption of EVs. In China, as you all know, that they have been giving huge amount of subsidy over the last 10 to 15 years. More than $900 billion of subsidies have been given. And of course, they are going to scale it down now since the EV adoption has picked up quite a bit, and approximately 38% of the four-wheelers in China are the EVs. All these factors are pushing up the adoption of EVs in the entire ecosystem, entire globally. Let me talk about the mobility and the EV penetration and touch some of the, I would say that the visible trends which we see globally. The first, in case of the short-haul mobility, which is the mobility maybe less than 300 kilometers, and it's penetrating both intercity and intracity, it is witnessing the accelerated penetration of the EVs, and the early signs of, in case of the long-haul mobility, as of now, of course, is that probably the transition fuel could be either LNG or hydrogen. But in case there is a a disruption happens in the space of battery technology, so that the heavy vehicles can get a longer range of approximately 1,000 kilometers, probably in that case, the EVs also could be a potential replacement for the fossil fuels in case of the long-haul mobility. Globally, EV penetration in the four-wheelers has already reached 20%, so that every 1 in 5 vehicles being sold globally is a EV as we speak today. This translates to approximately 14 million EV park across the globe. This phenomenal growth, has happened is the outcome of some of the major factors, such as the fall in the battery prices. In the last few years, we have seen that the battery prices have dropped by approximately 15%, which have ultimately resulted in the reduction in the cost of the EV. Significant increase in the models of the EVs. I think that's one thing which attracts the customers. And globally, we have seen more than 500 models of EVs which have been launched by the various OEMs. And the third, of course, the policy support by the government. As I have talked about, multiple governments are stepping forward to make sure that more and more adoption of the EVs take place. The penetration in the other segments of the vehicle has picked up quite a bit. The two-wheelers, it has reached more than 13%, and it's largely driven by the Asian countries, China, India, and some of the other countries in Asia. And as the buses, which is also going to be a big segment for the EV adoption, globally, of course, it's moving a little slow at around 3%. And the other light commercial vehicles also have picked up as far as the EV ecosystem is concerned. If I talk about the charging infrastructure, in the last year, there has been an increase of 40% in the charge points across the globe. And it has reached a number of approximately 40 million in different parts of the world wherever the EV adoption has started. Few factors which have helped for acceleration of the EV adoption is that, number one, the standardization of the charging system, and more or less large number of countries have adopted the CCS charging. This has emerged as the preferred choice of charging system, and only China is probably the country which is still preferring GBT. Approximately 80% reduction in the cost of the slow chargers, which we have witnessed over a period of last decade. And lastly, I would say that the digital platforms, I think those have made the life of EV customers much easier, locating the charger and reaching that particular location for charging their vehicle. In a nutshell, as we speak, EVs have already displaced 3% of the total oil requirement, that is approximately 1.7 million barrels a day, with the replacement of EVs from the fossil fuel-driven, the ICE vehicles. So I am sure that the EV dominance is going to take place in future, which is quite evident. Let me talk about the progress of EV ecosystem in our own country, India. Here also we are facing the worst summers. All of you would have seen that the temperature has crossed 50 degrees in multiple cities, especially in the states of Rajasthan and Maharashtra. And we are also the pollution capital of the world. 42 out of 50 most polluting cities are in India. So in line with the global trends, EVs also have started to make a noticeable inroads in the Indian short-haul mobility. As I said, that less than 300 kilometers, both intercity and intracity. The four-wheeler park has already, in the annual sale, has crossed 2 lakhs, which is almost 5x growth in the last couple of years. And majority of OEMs have also launched multiple models of EVs, and probably approximately 25 different models of EVs are already on the roads. However, we will see exponential growth in the charging infrastructure. The moment one of the large players among the OEMs like Maruti Suzuki, who is going to launch their EV variant somewhere in next year. We have seen that trend even in case of the CNG vehicles. 2 years back, when Maruti launched the factory-fitted variant of CNG, the growth suddenly, jumped to 53%, which was hardly in the range of 10 to 12%. So I think the same phenomenon is going to play out in the EV ecosystem also. Penetration of EVs in India in three-wheeler is already at 54%. Probably we are the world leaders in that. And it has crossed 7% in buses, 5% in two-wheelers and 2% in the four-wheelers, which is around 2 lakh vehicles the various OEMs are selling in India in the last year or so. India has seen 10x growth in the charging infrastructure in the last 2 years, and the total number of charge points in various states in India has crossed now 40,000. Currently, it's dominated by slow chargers, but I am sure that as the battery technology increases, the range increases, the charging infrastructure also will have to be upgraded to the fast charging. And obsolescence of the slow charger, I think, is another issue which the CPOs have to grapple with. In the financial year, FY25 may turn out to be a historical year because large number of OEMs are coming into the battery manufacturing space, and this is going to reduce the cost of battery with the new technologies coming in, and ultimately it's going to benefit the EVs for reduced capex and benefit the customers. Let me also now talk about the key challenges and the opportunities for embracing EVs in India. As per our assessment, EV penetration will cross 60% in 10 years, that is by 2034, ranging from 44% in four-wheelers to almost 60% in the two-wheeler space. The total park of EVs by the end of 10 years or a decade would be approximately 125 million in our country. This provides a huge opportunity for all the battery and the vehicle OEMs, the CPOs, the power producers, and the DISCOMs, and also various ancillary players who are associated with this EV industry. I think if we talk about, from the customer perspective, some of the issues at the forefront, if I can talk about, is number one, the affordability for the EVs. While the total cost of ownership is favorable for both two-wheelers and four-wheelers, but the initial capex for purchase of the vehicle is almost 25 to 50% more in case of EVs compared to the ICE vehicles. As all of you would be reading in the newspapers, in the state of United States, with the intense competition from the Chinese players like BYD, the Tesla, which was the market leader earlier in the technology and the EV space, their sales have slowed down and reduced by 20%. And there's a huge pressure in the cost also, which has also significantly come down. And we have seen that the second market for the EVs also has slowed down because people are worried about the replacement cost of the battery, which may have to be incurred at some point of time in future. So 40% of the vehicle cost, which is contributed by the battery, I think we have to leapfrog in the space of battery technology so that lot of localization of the the battery manufacturing in India will also help in that direction to make sure that the cost of the EV is reduced, the initial cost of the EV is reduced. The second challenge for the EV users is the range, and the real world range for two-wheelers in case of EV is approximately 70 kilometers, and for an entry model vehicle of four-wheeler is approximately 175 to 200 kilometers. Although for EV two-wheeler user it's probably okay because people don't drive more than 30-40 kilometers a day, but for the four-wheelers owners, it's a matter of concern, and the range anxiety always plays on the mind of the customer. So I'm sure that the new developments which are happening in the battery technology space, the advent of the solid-state battery is going to make sure that the range of the battery is significantly increased over the coming years. The EV variants also, every OEM is always very keen to make sure that they meet the aspirations of the customers by launching more and more new models. So currently we have, approximately 25 models. I am sure that over the years, like we have seen for Citroën, more and more new enticing models are going to be on the Indian roads. Safety also has been one of the concerns bothering the EV customers. We have seen some of the fires in the batteries. Although I believe that the battery fired is not due to the, I think, the poor quality of the cells. It's largely on account of the poor BMS or the thermal management of the electronics, I think. So this aspect also needs to be significantly addressed by the OEMs to make sure that the EV customers are given that assurance that on account of safety, they will not have any issues. Lack of widespread charging network is another concern with the EV consumers. Currently, only about 10% of the charging for EV four-wheelers takes at the public charging stations. I think the reason for that is probably there is no regulation in India for home charging, so largely the customers are charging at home. And also, I would say that at current point of time, the enough charging infrastructure is also not there in the country. So this is a classic chicken and egg story. And once the EV park, increases and goes beyond 5%, I think there is going to be exponential growth in the EV induction, and that will also directly help the CPOs to make sure that their network is expanded at a very faster pace, to cater to the demand of those EVs. For the CPOs, there are, 3-4 major concerns which are hindering the growth of the charging network in our country. Availability of the real estate is one issue. There was a survey done by MGN Times Network that in some of the major cities of India, 74% people have said that it's very difficult for them to find a parking space. And same is the case with the CPOs. It's very hard to get a good, location for of getting the charging station set up in our different parts of the cities in our country. So government, I think, can step in by mandating that all the public charging public parking slots in the malls and in the various other aspects are reserved. Some percentage of that is reserved for the EV charging station to be set up. The second, of course, is the high cost of DC fast chargers, their obsolescence, as I spoke, and the upstream power infra cost. In case of, the power, many of the states have done these reforms, and there is a benefit of the government policy on RDSS, a central government scheme wherein the fund in the upstream infrastructure augmentation for the EVs, there is a benefit to be availed from the central government. So I think that's one aspect which needs to be done, so that the cost of the setting up a charging station where getting the access to power from the DISCOM is a significant cost that can come down. The high cost of electricity is another issue. And I was talking to Mr. Vishnu in the morning that Tamil Nadu is one of the states where the cost of electricity is one of the highest. So that's also needs to be looked at by the state governments, which will help in encouraging the adoption of the EVs. The, green power, I think the whole proliferation of the EVs is not going to meet the objective of the government of decarbonization unless the charging is undertaken by the green electrons. So the government must simplify the open access policy, wherein taking green power from one state to the other is with the minimum cost, minimal taxes such as, or the cess which is currently levied is also reduced and, brought down to make sure that the charging cost is not significant, is also brought down for the customers. Let me, before I conclude, talk about how GOBP, as a CPO is contributing towards creating a robust public charging infrastructure for the EV users in India. So GOBP's compelling value proposition for the customer is to provide widest, most reliable and fast charging network, providing best value for money. We provide differentiated and unique customer experience through our world-class digital platform. We have one of the biggest charging network in India, in the whole country, with around 5,000 charge points already operational across major cities and highways. Our stations encompass all the formats, the hubs for the fleets, the OTG on the go stations, as well as the destination charging stations. So we operate the biggest charging hub with 274 charge points in the national capital of NCR region. So we are leader in providing DC fast charging. Our 40% of the network is more than 60 kilowatt, charge points. Our technology team constantly is innovating to roll out the pioneering innovations like dynamic load sharing or the auto charge, and to keep the uptime of the network more than 95%, which is very, very crucial for the EV users. So we are, among the first, I would say that we are the first CPO in India who has been able to source green electrons from our, parent company Reliance, and one of our hub in Bangalore is fully charged with the green power, access from within the state. So I think that's something which we are going to roll out across the country over the next couple of years. Our integrated convenience offer through Wildwind Cafe, all of you would see the stall over here also, will provide comfort to the B2C customers while they are traveling on the highways and want to avail the EV charging at our stations. So GOBP will continue to expand its network footprint, and provide best-in-class yet affordable charging experience to our customers throughout the countries. Thank you. Thanks again for patient hearing. Thank you very much.